The answer appears to be very easily. So why is the system so easy to wrangle? Well, either it's a system too lax or perhaps one that's too bureaucratic. Keith Levenstein, CEO at EconoBEE, joins us now to shed some light on just what we're looking at here. Keith, thanks so much for joining us today. Let's start off by taking a look at just how rife fraud is when it comes to the issuance and the holding of economic empowerment verification certificates in South Africa Incorporated.
I think it's very rough. We tend to use the word invalid certificates rather than forged or fraudulent certificates, and I tend to find that around about 5% of all certificates I see tend to be invalid for some reason or another. So it is fairly rough. It shouldn't be happening.
5% seems like a minimal percentage given the bigger picture, but the fact that the verification industry players say they come across at least one fraudulent or invalid certificate a week begins or begs the question, why is it so easy to access that kind of certification? Because it talks to the entire qualification process, doesn't it?
Yeah, that I think tends to be the biggest problem. Certificates get produced either by an accredited verification agency or an URBA approved agency, and it gets put out to the particular company who uses it with regard to their suppliers and their customers. What doesn't happen is there isn't a central registry of these certificates. So I might see a BE certificate that looks all right and it looks completely correct, but it actually isn't. And there's no real way for the average procurement officer to take into account if that certificate is fraudulent, if it is correct, if there is something wrong with it.
So what's the problem? It's the back office and the systems that need to be rectified or put in place adequately to support this entire initiative?
I would certainly say that that is one of the solutions to the problem. Let's have a central registry. It is something that the Department of Trade and Industry is supposed to be doing. They should have a database of all certificates so that we could all go to a central place and check whether that certificate is valid. Unfortunately, it hasn't happened. Which is why we've tended to manage our own database, and that's how I tend to come across many certificates that are invalid or fraudulent or forged, because I look at certificates over time and I can see one certificate that was issued in 2010 and it's the exact same certificate with the date changed to 2013.
What does the department say the problem is or the challenge is to actually getting adequate systems in place?
I don't know. I think that it's just the usual problem of government having to go through a long-winded tender process and other processes in order to get this up to date. I do know that the Department of Trade and Industry's B unit is under pressure. They've got a lot of work to do, and I don't think that they've got sufficient staff to handle all these issues. And of course, there are two different regulators. There's the SANES themselves as well as URBA, the audit body. So with two different processes in place, nobody seems to want to take ownership and responsibility of these particular problems. Obviously, I believe that it is only the Department of Trade and Industry who should be managing the whole process, but it doesn't tend to happen sometimes.
The onus has to be on the business or the company itself as well to follow the right route. Econo is one of the companies that's been recently highlighted as one that's challenged or put to the fore fraudulent certificates. They say that their credentials are very good. They'd have no motive to falsify the certificate other than saving on cost. I mean, what's the cost of such an exercise?
There are two costs involved. One is to become compliant. So for a smallish company, they've got to do a little bit of work with regard to their employment equity, which isn't really a cost. They've got to spend maybe some money on skills development or enterprise development, but those costs aren't really very big for a smallish company. And then the actual process of getting that verified certificate could be in the region of between 8 and 14 or 15,000 rand for a smallish business. It goes up to maybe millions for the large corporates. So it's not a lot of money, but there is work to be done, and there's maybe the hassle factor is possibly why some companies do this instead of going through the proper channels.
Should it be this costly, this cumbersome an exercise?
I don't think it's too expensive an exercise to go through. If your company's annual turnover is 20 million rand and you're asked to spend, say, 10,000 rand per annum, it's less than the cost of one employee. So I don't think it's an unreasonable number. Obviously, it is an extra cost, so I recognize that the bottom line is always important. But I don't see that it is too onerous a a cost.
So not enough to get a company or warrant a company to cheat the system. We've had the Department of Trade and Industry last year to promise in having any company with fraudulent certificates blacklisted from government business. The follow through there, have those repercussions been felt?
I personally haven't seen very much. I will, as a BE professional, I see it as my duty, and the Act specifically makes it my duty to report every single problematical certificate to the department. In fact, I report them to the various sector councils as well. And I have to say that I get very, very little feedback. Other than an acknowledgement that there is a problem, not terribly much is done. In many cases, nobody seems to know what they can do, and we all seem to be waiting for the BE amendment bill to be signed by the President, which eventually will cause up to 10 years in jail time if you're found guilty, and 10% of your company turnover. But even that is going to take many, many months or years before a BE commissioner is even appointed. So in the meantime, it seems to be a little bit of a free-for-all.
Yep, so in the meantime, with all of that being the case, if you're looking at these fraudulent certificates, it brings to question BEE and what it in reality achieves at the end of the day. What's your assessment of BEE credentials being struck and the aims and objectives behind the entire initiative being met at the end of the day?
I'm somebody who is very positive towards transformation. I want to see it happen. I know the reasons for it, and I think it is helping many, many people. At the same time, I sometimes get very dejected when I see various companies shunning the system in the way that they do. But in general, I think that BEE should be working if it is applied properly. People should be benefiting, and they are benefiting, and many, many companies are doing some really good work. With regard to empowerment, with regard to charitable work, etc. But yes, it does unfortunately call the whole process into a little bit of question if too many companies can get away with it. The biggest problem, if you get away with something, it means that you could be losing out on a deal with your customer because somebody else's invalid level 2 is better than your very good and genuine level 4. And I don't like seeing companies losing business.
And those are real issues that we have to contend with and deal with right now. Of course, talk of the new BEE amendment bill planning to assist in terms of authorizing imposition of legal penalties. We'll, of course, be tracking the story as it unfolds. Keith, thanks so much for having joined us. Keith Levenstein is CEO at EconoBEE.
Thank you.